Welcome to Book Talk. And tonight I am so delighted to have my friend Rachel Hauck back. We were just having the best time catching up. And in some ways, it would be fun to let you all just listen to that, but it was way too personal and just
Yeah.
illustrates how deep our friendship is because we have just known each other for probably 15, almost 20 years now, which is crazy to think about. But
Oh,
Rachel is one
yeah.
of my favorite people because she just loves Jesus so deeply. And every year at ACFW, she takes us all into his presence through worship, which is such a sweet gift. And Rachel, it's just so fun to have you back. And we're going to talk about your new book,
Woohoo.
The Best Summer of Our Lives.
Yay. Oh, first of all, it's great to be with you, Kara, and everybody at Book Talk. Hello, hello, hello. And it was great catching up with you. Kara and I used to be roomies with the
Yep.
ACFW board meeting. And yeah, we've been somehow always involved with ACFW since 2005,
Probably yeah,
6,
2005 was
6.
my first one.
Yeah.
2007, I was on the board, and
Yeah, I
it's
got
been
to
a
tell
long
y'all,
time.
we show up at the 2005 conference, which was in Nashville. And all of a sudden there's like, everybody's talking about this little dynamo named Kara Putnam. I'm like, who is this person? What is happening? And she was,
Aw.
and you were just a dynamo. I remember you at Dallas. When we went back to Dallas, you were just in 06, 07. You were just really, she just, you were a kind of person who just hopped in and contributed right away. And so that was really took notice of those of us who were on the board. And then we became friends. And what I love about Kara is her genuine also just love for Jesus and love for others. You really do demonstrate that. And so
Oh,
it was
thank
good
you.
catching up and hearing about what's going on in your life other than
Yeah,
Facebook.
yeah, exactly. I appreciate social media for being able to stay in touch with people, but there's nothing like just getting together and chatting and being able
Yeah.
to just go deep. And that's what I
Yeah.
appreciate about our friendship. I mean,
Yeah.
there was discipling going on, hopefully both
Yeah.
directions,
Both
but
directions. Yeah,
definitely.
for sure. For sure.
But we are here to talk about your new book and
Yay.
all
I'm
the
so
good
excited.
things
Yeah.
that are going on because I adore your spiritual fairy tales. I love going back to them all the time. But this one strikes me as going back more to almost like your Nash Vegas books because it has kind of a going back to music, which you're a worship leader, and more of your it still has kind of like the wedding dress, small town feel, women's fiction. There's just a lot going on in it. So tell us how you had the idea for The Best Summer of Our Lives.
Well, I had the idea for the summer of 77, and it may or may not have been inspired by Ellen Hildebrand's title, The Summer of 69. And I thought, yeah, it's really kind of a cool way to look into, hold on one second, getting over something. It's kind of a cool way to take a look at nostalgia. I think everybody loves nostalgia. And of course, when you grew up in the 70s, nostalgia was huge because everybody was nostalgic about the 50s. So I kind of just toyed with the title. I was writing the True Blue Royals at the time, and I just had put it on the shelf, and I knew that I was producing the True Blue Royals myself. And so I thought, if I'm going to do this summer of 77, I'm going to have to, partner with a publisher, which is really the way to go as far as Rachel Hauck writing is concerned. And so that's kind of how the genesis of the story. And so then immediately I went kind of like, well, the heroine will have to be named Summer. We'll have to play on that, have a little metaphor happening. And then one day I was walking, and I was telling Kara earlier during the whole COVID season and into 20 and 2021, my husband and I started praying on the fives, 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. And what was really weird about even just my writing day would just magically end at 5. I'd be done. Like when I was doing the fast draft and the first draft, I'd be done at 5. I'm like, okay, I'm off walking. And in that time, I'm praying and talking and thinking. And then I saw one day I was walking, I thought, well, what would her friends be named? And I came up with the seasons, spring, autumn, and I go winter. And I'm like, oh, that's just 2 on the nose. And then I saw the name Snowden. So she's Margaret Snowden, but of course her nickname is Snow. So everybody calls her Snow. So we had the 4 seasons. So I just kind of like was putting all these pieces together. And originally we had moved to Tallahassee in the summer of 77. And that part of the book is set in Tallahassee, Florida. And the other part is in a made up town, fictional town in Oklahoma called Tumbleweed, Oklahoma. And I also had some childhood years in Oklahoma. And I kind of wanted to introduce this fear factor. And I thought that Ted Bundy had murdered the Chi Omega girls at Florida State in the summer of 77. But actually, when I looked into it, it was January of 78. And then the more I looked into Ted Bundy, the more creepier I felt. So I'm like, I don't want anything to do with writing up. Even he wasn't going to be a character or anything like that. It was just going to be like, this happened. And I wanted to see how this horrific thing happening affected the community. And it's really kind of what we all endured during COVID. This horrific thing happened. And so what was its overall effect and the ripple effect on the community? And so that's what I was looking into. And so my husband found the Camp Scott murders. That did happen the summer of 77. We had never heard of it before, but in 22, there were 2 documentaries produced on the Camp Scott murders. It's still a cold case to this day. So I used that, murdered at a Girl Scout camp, and it introduced that fear factor into my girls who are camp counselors at this small camp in Tumbleweed, Oklahoma by Lake Skiatook, I think it's how it's pronounced. So yeah, that's kind of like, I'm just putting all the pieces together and really investigating friendship. They've been friends for 12 years, best friends, survived high school together. How is this summer, which they wanted it to be the best summer of their lives. And so that's how we morphed it to the title, The Best Summer of Our Lives. They wanted this to be, this is, between high school and college, this is our best summer. We're going to hang out at home. We're going to shop. We're going to go to the beach. We're going to go backpacking through Europe. And then we're going to all go to Florida State together. And we're going to pledge the same sorority. And then we're going to live in the dorms and apartments together. And they've just had this whole life. We rented each other's maid of honor and their weddings. And boom, this whole life they had planned because they've been friends since kindergarten. They've been in and out of each other's houses for 12 years. They're like sisters. 2 of them don't have any siblings except for each other. But the summer doesn't deliver anything like they thought it was going to deliver. But was it the best summer of their lives? So we go on a journey to discover, is it going to be the best summer of their lives? So, so yeah.
I love it. Yeah, well, and I love, because you always create these really richly layered stories that they look like they're going to be these nice, simple, sweet little reads. And then I start reading them and there's layer after layer after layer. And when we were talking, your approach is story is art and characters are a joy to you. So how did you come to that approach? Because some people are like, it's just a character, it's just a story, just throw it all together and people are going to read it and it's fine. But to you, it's much more than that. So how did you decide that, it really is this process and this labor of love that produces art?
That I think it just came over time. And originally, to be honest, was just a practical. So when I first was published, I started out with Heart Song, the little category romances, as you did. And I never got nominated for Book of the Year or anything. Now, I was always told by my high school teachers, my father, my college professors, you're good. You know what you're doing. I had this class at Ohio State where it was writing for a magazine. So it was more like feature stories. I literally didn't know what to do. My dad goes, write what you know. So I wrote this whole story about driving in a car with my brother and his friends to school and them doing donuts and empty parking lots and mashing mailboxes with baseball bats. And there was this hole over his exhaust. And that's where I had to ride in the hatchback. So I'm, inhaling all this carbon monoxide. And I got an A on it. And my professor was like, did you see this metaphor and that metaphor and this? And the rest of the students were like, what is this drivel? This is just, no, God, this isn't sophisticated writing. But he looked at me across the table and he goes, if you can figure out what you did, you can make it. And so I had all of this influx, but then when I got published, I was nobody. I didn't win any awards. I didn't get nominated. I didn't get promoted by my publisher. You know what I mean? I didn't. So I'm like, I must not be good. So I assigned myself a lie. I must not be good enough. So I go, how do I get better? How do I get better? And then I met Susie Warren and we partnered together and we've been writing partners and friends for over 20 years. And, as we discussed writing, I would start to see these different layers. And when we discussed how to develop a character and we talked about the dark moment story of the past and, that moment of truth and what lie do they believe and what's their epiphany? And we started layering these things in. And then I think the more I did it, that thing that my college professor saw kicked in. And instead of me writing it accidentally, I wrote it and go, oh, okay, there it is. Now I have to decide, is that the one I want to use or that one over there? So I started recognizing, I guess, my own gifting and my own talent. And so now what I have to do is not overplay it. So I think that's what happened. And I literally will read something that I wrote yesterday and thought that was really good, man, that was good. And I'll read it today and go, oh my gosh, what were you thinking? So I am my own worst critic, I'm sure, but I love that process. And then as I'm writing, I'm on chapter 5, I get to chapter 25 and something will occur and I'll go, oh, boom, there it is. Now I know how to layer it into chapter 5 and chapter 10 and maybe chapter 12. So I started learning some of those techniques and I learned how to hook the story. So it does sound overwhelming. So if you're a new author, chill out, you'll figure it out. And I think that's how, and I wanted to get better. I wanted to be somebody who readers loved reading their books and had enjoyment out of it. But at the same time, I didn't want to wear them out. So when I wrote Dining with Joy, I remember somebody said it had so many layers. And I think she was a new author and I think she was more impressed. But what it hit me with was, wow, you could have exhausted the reader. So I had to learn to back up a little bit. And of course, I had an editor named Amy McConnell, and she would say, Rachel, leave some cookies on the lower shelf, because I was just really trying to write this highbrow kind of story and using these metaphors and using dialogue that really kind of like would fly overhead sometimes. And that was too hard. So I had to kind of learn to balance it, but I also had to get rid of the lie that I wasn't good enough just because I didn't get nominated for awards or I didn't get nominated for book of the year or my publisher didn't put any marketing dollars behind me. I had to divorce myself from that and get rid of that lie and just start having fun with it. And so that's where for me, the Lord gives me so much joy is in the writing process. And if I leave off, am I going to do well? If I'm going to leave off, I got to turn in a perfect manuscript first time around. If I let all that go, I have so much fun and so much joy in that process. And so that's where I think my sweet spot is. And that's where I end up, finding all the layers and encountering God. Actually, the last 4 books, I've actually had moments in prayer where all of a sudden the Lord will say, you know what I want? I want this with more clarity than I've ever had in the books before. And I'm like, okay. And the rest is up to me, but he'll say, that's what I want. And that's what I put in. So
I love that because writing is such a creative process and it's where our reflection of a creative God can come out and where we really can partner with them if we're willing to do it. And so I love how you can reflect that and you're expressing that, because I think sometimes we can get trapped in the word count, we can get trapped in the work of it, and lose sight of the joy of the creativity and the process. And so being able to find that, I think, is just really, it's such a sweet spot when that happens. And
where is he not creative?
I know.
Where is he not creative? And even with people who don't know him, I mean, look at Hollywood. There are some really crazy creative people. Look at the people in Silicon Valley. Now I have heard people say no one in Silicon Valley is creative. They're just imitators, which could be true, but there's also a lot of creativity that comes in software development, even in implementation and in marketing and all of those things. New York, Madison Avenue, creative. So where is he is creative. God is a creator. And so that's where I started really, and also had this revelation of, I think a lot of times it's Christian fiction authors, and I hate that moniker, but that's the one that we have. I'm an author who happens to be a Christian who wants to write from that worldview. But I also think what we end up doing is, because we feel like we have to have God in the book, we end up writing about characters who have a relationship with church or relationship with traditions or relationships with doctrine over a relationship with Jesus. And or through that, there's a relationship with Jesus. So my mindset now is, and I think it's been for a while, but I just now actually kind of put words to it. I want Jesus to show up in my book, not church. So I want Jesus to show up in my book, not religiosity. So my characters may or may not pray. My characters may or may not go to church. One may go to church. She may not even be a believer. I just wrote a scene yesterday where she ends up in church to her surprise. And she's not really even a believer. She's surprised her parents are going to church, but she encounters Emmanuel, God with us. And so that's what I'm really kind of starting to think, Kara, as far as like how I am
Yeah.
writing with a Jesus culture kind of author. Is I want to, where does Jesus show up in my book? That's the questions that I'm personally asking. Where does Jesus show up in my book? And if it's someone singing a hymn or I mention a hymn, that's good. I don't mind that. But what I want is Jesus to show up in the book. And that's my constant question. How do you want to come into the story?
I love that. And I think that's why I keep going back to what I call your spiritual fairy tales, because
Right,
it is
right. Yeah.
Emmanuel showing up in the book. And it literally
Yes.
is Emmanuel.
Yes.
And it's such a fresh way of Jesus showing up on the page. And so I
Yeah.
actually was just making a note of that, because even the books I've written, the last two, I've had that tension of, well, there's not like this really strong Bible verse or Bible theme, but I'm like, I don't want to force it, because I don't think that actually serves the story. And I'm all about, what is the story requiring, and how is God showing up? How is
Absolutely.
that theme? How is his presence showing up? And so that's always been something that I think is a tension, because I
Mm-hmm.
always hate the check the box chapter. Where's the check the box? Someone found
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or, and I'm like, that's not realistic. I don't want it, because then we skip it, and then it's not life-giving, and it's not real, versus it's organic to the story. And that's the one that God wants to be told in this moment, on this page, in this session, or this chapter. And so, you know, it is that partnership. It's that real life
Absolutely.
in the moment. And I think that's where again, the magic, the chemistry, that real life of being a faith-filled author shows up. And it's all about that relationship that you have with God, that I have with Jesus, and that partnering with the Holy Spirit on, okay, what's supposed to be happening right now in
Yeah.
this book.
Yeah.
And sometimes it comes in the layer 2 or 3.
Sometimes, absolutely. And if you think about it, if you look at scripture, the only people who had trouble with Jesus were the religious people, because he was messing with their
Yeah.
world. The sinners and the non-religious people loved him because he loved them. And I think his confrontation with religiousness was like, because you're living by this, we would say the law, rather than, but you're not showing any love to any of these people. You're not helping these people because, they don't measure up to the law. And guess what? Neither do you. And so I'm kind of thinking like,
Yeah.
Our audience is largely believers, but I want a non-believer to be able to pick up my book and not feel, like I'm getting hit with religiosity, or I don't even know what this is. What are they talking about? I want, if I do use a scripture reference, I try to put it in common language. So like, if it's just good, that's good. That's a good point. If you don't know the Bible, if you know the Bible, you go, ooh, I love that verse. Right. Or I love that concept. And so I'm constantly going, where do you want to be in the book, and what's your message? And it's funny because a lot of times it's also his message to me. So, or it's something where I'm at. A lot of times people say, well, what did God teach you in this book? I said the same thing he always teaches me: come up leaning from the wilderness, leaning on your beloved. Here's how you look like me. That's like every book. But even in the process of writing, you get in that moment where like, oh my gosh, deadline is that far away. I got that much to do, and I don't know that much. And so you feel like, how am I going to get this 5-pound bag of sugar in this 1-pound box? And so, but even in that, I was walking the other day and I started, a little bit of that panic was rising up, like, oh my gosh, or that anxiety, like, oh, I don't have enough time. And I just started going, no, I'm going to do this. I've always done this. I've really only missed a deadline majorly once because I had a huge physical issue that hit me out of the blue. But I always make my deadlines. So like, wait a second, Rachel, let's not go live in that camp. Let's live in this camp. God is with you. He will enable you. Are you trusting him or not? Even though you got a, button chair, finger on keyboard, he's the one who's going to give you the creative energy to do this. So let's not go there. Let's just say, God's bigger than me. He'll make it happen. I'm just going to be faithful to sit down and write every day and try to hit my word count. And so, don't worry about it. You're going to get it done. You will, just plan it out, pray it out, trust him to give you the grace to do it, because right now in that third draft before the final, before I turn it in. And it's got to be 5,000 words a day. Of course, I can pull words that I've already written, but I haven't written the ending. So that's going to be next week's going to be a haul, but he will enable me to do it. Cause I kind of know where you know where you're going when you're at that point anyway, but still a lot of fresh words that haven't been written before are going to come next week. So
Yeah. Well, and that's where I have been known to pray that Joshua prayer of the sun stand still. And
I'm
God
adding
has
that
been
one. I'm adding
faithful.
that one. Sun, stand still.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm
Yep.
amazed.
And I am amazed how he can stretch the time. And there have been so many times where I've been like, okay, God, you know everything that is on my plate. And you know that when I took on these responsibilities, I took them with you and my husband. I didn't take them lightly. I really took them with okay, Lord, I feel like this is something that you're saying I should accept. So I'm trusting that you're going to help me do it. Don't know how. Like, it's completely unbelievable that I wrote 52,000 words in 3 weekends, but I did it. And they're actually good words. Doesn't mean they're not going to shift, but in the span of 3 weeks, weekends, it got done.
You need this. I'm putting this on you right now.
I'm like,
let the reader beware. That is incredible. That's about 20,000 words a weekend. I mean, 15,000 words a weekend. You think most authors do 1,000 to 2,000 a day, maybe 2,500. So, that's kick butt working right there. And you're not as fresh because you've been working all week.
Exactly. But it was one of those that I really felt like I could tell it was going to be tight. And I was telling Eric, because there were some panic moments, but it was like, I think it all adds up. And I felt like God was giving me this story, and he gave me the vision for how it fit into the overall. And my publisher was on board because it's an indie co-branding, co-marketing kind of thing. And it fits in really, really well. And there's a spinoff series that can come from it and all this. And then the words just flowed. And I can write fast. I don't write that fast. Yeah. It's just really cool how God does that.
Amen.
And
I love that.
All him. All him.
I wouldn't write without him.
And that's where the partnership comes in. Oh, no kidding. No kidding. So when you're in those moments of thinking what's next, because you've written a lot of books, you've been on the New York Times list, you have done all kinds of different things, women's fiction, the spiritual fairy tales, these dual timeline. A lot of your books will have, and I'm not all the way through this one yet, I can't wait, but you often have some type of a spiritual, I'm going to call it spiritual magical realism, where there's something that's kind of happening outside the realm of reality.
I call it when the supernatural breaks into the natural.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So how do you come up with those moments where you're like, this is what it's going to be in this story? Because I like to walk around thinking, I see what could be possible, but I don't to that extent.
Yeah. So usually I never start with it. I never start with a theme. I start with a theme as far as life and characters are concerned. Like I could say thematically, this is going to be about healing and forgiveness and restoration. But I never ever think of a spiritual thread when I'm developing the characters. So I develop the characters, I write out the plot, what I think those things are going to be. I work on all of those story crafting elements. And then somewhere along the way, it'll hit me like, ooh, that would work. That would work. So with this book, Summer Encounters, so here they are out in this middle of nowhere, Tumbleweed, Oklahoma, which I named so you would exactly get an idea of where they're at. But there is this oasis of a lake. So they do have a lake around them. So Summer is kind of like the main storyteller, because when you have 4 on stage, you have this ensemble cast, somebody has to be kind of like the driving force. So Summer is that. And you cannot have all 4 characters have a spiritual experience. I learned that with Fifth Avenue Story Society. That is just a weighty book that ain't nobody want to read and ain't nobody going to write. I didn't like writing it, let alone. So what I had with her is like, okay, she's the one who's going to have this supernatural encounter And so, well, they're out there on the prairie. It's 1977. I did live in Oklahoma in the late 60s. And all of a sudden it hit me. Oh, there's a tent revival. There's a tent revival out there.
Mm.
And I was like, okay. And then usually what I do is what I've been doing is I've been running through the names of Jesus, teacher, preacher, Emmanuel. And he's been more metaphorical. And like in the wedding dress, he was the purple man because he was this man who showed up in both timelines wearing purple. And so, and do you know, Jesus referred to himself as the Son of Man more than any other of his names. And so I think he was trying to say, I am the Son of Man. I am the one. I am the guy who has redeemed us before the Father. So there's something, I haven't even explored all that yet. I've just recently started unpacking that. Like, Jesus, why did you call yourself the Son of Man? You are relatable. And so you've walked where we've walked. So I try to bring him in the supernatural. And of course, you and I both know, probably a lot of people listening have met people who've had visions. I know people who've gone to heaven. I know people who have vivid, dynamic dreams. And so I thought, why not? So that's what I kind of tapped into. We know there's a supernatural world. So I just kind of peek behind the veil every once in a while. So that's what Summer encounters this tent revival. And initially, it was just a standard tent revival, but then it became the mystical element throughout the story. So, but you can't overplay it because then it's just too heavy and too weird. And and it was just, and then I just let it kind of work itself out and try to see like, well, how does it fit into the rest of the story? And then how do I hook it in? And so it is something that needs to be massaged. And it's also something, again, I don't overplay, but it needs to hit the story at least 3 times. In order for it to kind of tell its little story, it needs to have at least a couple of those. So so that's how it came up with this one. I started with, let's have a tent revival. And Summer's the only one who goes, and Summer's actually the only one who sees it. So.
Oh, that's so cool.
Of course, she thinks she's crazy. Yeah, it's super fun.
Yes. Yeah. Well, because you can have people you could have had all 4 of them there and they would have all experienced it very differently. That's just how those types of situations are. So of course she's going to be like, oh my gosh, what did I just see? And I couldn't have just seen what I thought I saw.
Yeah. And that actually happened in the first draft. I did have all of 4 of them there. And when I rewrote it, it was just too much because now, I call it dropping the bombs. Well, I dropped this huge bomb. There's this huge tent revival meeting, all the 4 seasons, all friends are there. Now I'm going to have to go in each one's POV and dissect the meeting. And then they're going to have to talk together. So how am I? No. Oh no. Yeah. That just kind of felt like, but I'm still have this camp to run. Each one still has their individual problems that they're dealing with. And one of them has a very serious problem that she has to deal with. But if I send her to that tent revival, which I think even originally she was the one who went, Spring was the one who went, and I was using it. But that kind of eliminated her problem. And I needed her to walk through her problem in a more broken way. And so, and actually, even when I got into her 97 scenes as an adult, I still needed her to not have resolve with that because of how I planned the story. So there you go. You kind of nuance it as you go. So
that's awesome. Well, and I hope everyone has enjoyed just getting some of the behind the scenes because Rachel is masterful, and The Best Summer of Our Lives is in the latest offering coming out at the end of June, just in time for this summer. And I can't wait to finish it because I always love your books and just the way that I get swept into them. But then I always see Jesus in a new way at the end, which I love. I love. Thank you, friend. It was so good to spend time with you.
Can I just say one little thing real quick to everybody?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you pre-order the book, and this is why I'm giving you this pitch, you can go to my website and we have a form you can fill out and you can be invited to the Zoom launch party on the 27th of June. It is a Tuesday. And we do have some really fun prizes and just to be a great time together. And I think I'm going to have a really super duper fun surprise for everybody. So I would love it if you guys would pre-order. Just if you're interested in the book, of course, and might as well take advantage of, if you want to get it, you might as well take advantage of it and come to the Zoom launch party. And so that'll be a by invitation only. So I would love to see you guys there and share some funds and some prizes and, probably a lot of readers are my age or just a little bit younger. So we've got stories from the 70s. And so we're going to let people talk about their stories and maybe put up their 1970s picture. So we would love to see you guys there just to have a good time. It's my first book in 2 years, by the way, that I co-wrote 2 Sunrise books with new authors, and those came out last year. But this is my first solo book in 2 years. So we're going to party. Yeah.
That's awesome. And we'll put the link in the show notes. So it's really easy to go find
please.
that.
Yes.
So that's awesome. All right. Well, thanks, Rachel. It was so good to see you and just catch up, and very excited for the book. And I've already pre-ordered it because it's a Rachel Hauck book.
All right. Awesome. There we go. Thanks, Kara. Love you, girl.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.